Hey everyone, so I think this is going to be our third installation of repotting with me here. And this time I have an exciting bunch, or an exciting group of plants I would say, and they're all Anthuriums actually. And these are Anthuriums that I had recently acquired because they are not Anthuriums that I had in my Brooklyn apartment. They are Anthuriums that I got here while in the Finger Lakes, so just basically within the last 2 years. They have been kind of stuck in this common house for right now, but the plans are to actually move them down to the meadow house, which is why I'm going to be repotting them today. And I wanted to share some stories on each of them so that you could get a little more familiar with them, and you could also see which planter pots I'm going to be using, and I'll be making a nice little mix of kind of random potting soil because I have the Espoma's Organic Orchid mix, and I have about a quarter or maybe a fifth bag left of Espoma's Organic potting mix. I have some leftover Perlite mix that I had from one of my last potting episodes, and I also have a bunch of like coconut coir basically that I had from my Anol's little tropical paradise that I have for her. I have to figure out how to fit the Anol in here some way, shape, or form in each one of these videos for those of you who have watched the first two. So I think what I'll do is I'll pot the smallest one first, and then I'll kind of move up to the much larger one that you see peeking in here. And so the first one that I have here is this one. And I think I probably acquired this maybe a little over a year ago, less than that probably. I know time flies, but this one's an interesting one. I think I had first seen this hybrid in Singapore, and I was in Singapore maybe about 3 years ago. Let me get a close-up of those leaves. Look at how bullate those leaves are, and just how, I guess quilted is another term for them, bullate, quilted. But the other thing that I'd like to actually show you here is the petioles. The petioles are like this burgundy wine, red wine color, which is really beautiful. And these seem to be fairly resilient plants. And I'm pretty certain these guys are grown in tissue culture now. So I'm gonna pull this out and I'll show you why I think that. Well, one reason why I think that is that they've become so common and they're not that expensive. You know, I know they're a hybrid, but some hybrids, especially in the Anthuriums, could be really expensive. And the other reason why I guessed that is because you'll see that it's kind of grown in this little bullet-shaped peat block here. And that seems very characteristic to what I saw when I was in the Netherlands and they had this like tissue culture lab, and they were just pumping out spathiphyllum and actually Anthuriums and Anthurium adrianums, which are the flamingo flowers, the heart-shaped, colorful bract, and also orchids. And so they just basically pump these out in tissue culture, put them in these little pellets or peat pellets, and then just kind of pump them out from there. So this pellet, basically, I don't know if you saw when I was taking this out, it was like shrinkflation. The peat in the mix was kind of shrinking, and this pellet started to kind of be, push out. Yeah, it's definitely time to repot this. But the root structure, look, it looks great. It started to circle up a little bit there, but it's nice and loose. And as you could see from a close-up of here, the Anthurium roots are pretty meaty. These are epiphytic plants in most cases, or hemi-epiphytic in some cases, and they are not technically growing in the soil substrate. Oftentimes they're growing on some other type of plant. Or, maybe their seed gets dropped onto a tree and we'll find a surface to grow on there. But I'm going to plant this one up in this gorgeous planter right here. And actually, it's so strange. I found these planters on Etsy. Gary Burkow is his name. And he just so happens to be a local guy who's here. So he actually ended up dropping these planters off to me. So I'll leave a link to his shop. But I mean, look at the detail on that. It's this kind of like charred charcoal kind of look with this planter. And what I like about this planter with the Anthurium, this has this kind of reddish clay look to the planter pot, and that very much matches the red petioles of this plant. So that's what we're gonna go for. And I'm gonna make like a nice little mix. Here, I'm gonna take these dead leaves out and make this nice little mix. And utilize that peat mix that they had here. And I'm gonna add some of this orchid bark mix here, which has some nice chunks of charcoal and whatnot. And because there's already so much of that current mix, and I'm gonna just drop in some of this coconut, because why not? I have it, let's use it. Let's use it all. And I'm gonna mix that up. And I have a fair bit of perlite already in here, but I have my trusty jar of perlite that I could definitely go with if I wanted to, but this has nice perlite. And I really just wanna get these plants in a mixture where it'll have a lot more drainage. Sometimes if you go strictly with like a peat mix, for instance, it just could dry out and shrink. And I have to say, all of these plants to me right now look a little droughty. They definitely need water. So I want to get them into a nice, healthy mix. Ooh, this is looking really good. Look at this mix right here. Nice fir bark, got some coconut mix, lots of perlite, some peat. And I'm in winter here right now, but I'll probably be fertilizing these in spring, so you could just use a nice standard balanced fertilizer. I like to use an organic fertilizer because a lot of the energy goes into the leaves of this plant. It's all really about the leaves. It's not necessarily about the flowers that come out of these Anthuriums. You could even go a little higher on the nitrogen. That would be fine. They would probably enjoy that. So again, here is a closer view of that pellet, that peat pellet. So you can see that there, and also the thick roots that you have on this Anthurium luxurians / radicans. I don't even know if I said, what kind of hybrid this is. But again, I was in Singapore about, I would say about 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago now. And they had a plant that looked very similar to this. And I thought, well, is that an luxurians? What was it? But it hadn't come out in the US market, or if it did, it was very few and far between. But this one's become, I would say, a bit more commercial. So yeah, so my goal with these plants is to get them in their final planters for quite some time. And I'm putting a lot more thought into the planters that I'm putting them in, because I want it to look good. I want them to be statement pieces. I think about some of the tours that I've been in and all that other kind of stuff. I think about like when you're in the final home that you're in, you get a chance to really think through how you want to design things, and you want to get up and see some beauty in your life, every day. And plants give you that. They really do, especially if you take care of them, give them love, and give them the right kind of conditions. And I'm not exactly certain what room these plants will go in when I'm there. I'd like to get some of these Anthuriums, though, into the bathroom. The bathroom has great light, and I think it would have the humidity that I think is lacking personally in this house, especially in the winter months. It can get really dry, and you'll see some of the blemishes on the plants that I think come from just being a little bit too dry. Okay, this is a really nice mix, and I'm gonna press that peat pellet down a little bit just so it doesn't come popping right back up. All right, I'm gonna water this plant in. And again, giving it a good water all the way around the plant is advisable. You don't have to overwater it right away, and because you could easily, the water takes a while to actually get down through the plant, so you could check and see if the water's coming out, which here it is. And then you could always tip that water out into the sink or anything, so it doesn't like suck it back in. I don't always do that, but if you're fertilizing it, for example, and the fertilizer goes through and then it sucks the fertilizer salts back up, that could actually damage some of the roots. So I would just be mindful of that. But it's always good to give it a nice thorough watering so that it pulls the oxygen all the way down. And a lot of times the plant is pulling up the water and the nutrients from the little feeder roots or the tips of the roots where the roots are growing. So if you water too superficially, sometimes you risk not getting the plant the nutrients or the water that it needs. So that's this plant. That was pretty easy. This is obviously my smallest plant. But man, oh man, I love that planter. I mean, I don't know if you could see if this camera is picking up on the detail of that, but the texture is so beautiful, and the way that it goes with the texture of these quilted bolete leaves. Love it, love it, love it, love it. The next plant on my list is the only Anthurium species that I actually have here. And this is an Anthurium crystallinum, very beautiful leaf. I could see that these are starting to cup and curl, and what that tells me is that this just has a little lack of humidity. It has a little lack of water. So you could see all those different leaves here. It did have a little growing tip here that unfortunately dried out. I'm not always in this space, so I'm not always watering this plant as frequently. Plus, I noticed the potting medium. Let me see if I could show you this. It's kind of crusty. It doesn't have a lot of texture, and it's definitely like heavy in that peat mix and has definitely dried out and shrunk. And oftentimes when that happens, if you're trying to water a plant, it basically just, the water like rushes off the soil. It actually doesn't go through the soil. So what I'm going to do is, again, break these clods of soil up or substrate up, and then give it something that has a bit more of a well-draining mix, just like the last one that I gave. And again, I think this is probably one that I'm going to be putting into the bathroom in the meadow house, because this deserves a lot more humidity. And you can see the texture of those kind of quilted bolete leaves of the radicans/luxurians. That to me tells me that it's probably a bit more resilient when it comes to drying out. This one has thick leaves, don't get me wrong, and it's a nice velvety touch, but they don't feel as thick as the hybrid. And sometimes a hybrid becomes a bit more strong compared to the species, especially when you're talking about an indoor plant. So let me kind of pull this out and we'll just analyze the roots together. And one of my favorite things to do is really analyze the roots. So, oh, and I should say that crystallinum, it's an Anthurium that's native to Colombia. Colombia shares a special place in my heart. Dated a Colombian before. and then also Panama. So again, really thick finger-like roots. You could see that starting to circle around, but nothing too bad. And I will say, if it's one thing that's really characteristic to Anthuriums, they get some mean, meaty roots. That is for sure. Well, what is surprising is that, kind of take this back, this substrate isn't as crusty as what it looked like. It just like kind of the surface seemed a bit crusty. The substrate here seems really nice. But I'm gonna still break it up a little bit, and I am going to give this a slightly bigger pot. And I will say that I love, love, love the look of brass or gold against these dark green velvety leaves. And I had a brass planter that I could not find or locate, but it's fine. It's too small for this plant anyway. But I found this other one. And all of these, I had these planter pots, except for the Gary's I had in Brooklyn. Oh, this one's so heavy. Look at this gilded pot right here. This is no joke. This is a very heavy-duty planter pot. But there's no holes in this, so it's, to me, it's more like a cache pot. It's a decorative planter pot. So I went and I found, like, hey, I have this old planter, this could fit right in, but it's a little too low in that pot. And then I found this one, this terracotta that actually soaked in water, but it's already dried out. I sometimes will like to soak my terracotta pots in water so that when I water the plant, the water doesn't like get sucked up by the clay or the terracotta. Anyway, this is already kind of dried out. It's very hot in here. But I'm just going to basically put it in like this. I need to find a proper basin for this though, like a bottom to catch the water, because I'd hate to have the water sitting in this cache pot. I did actually bring in some bases here. I have these this terracotta base, and I have some of these, I don't know if these are called eco pots. They're pretty handy to have, especially if you need to have a basin like under your terracotta, if you don't want to leave like basically water lines on your desk or table or anything along those lines. So I sometimes will pick those up, but honestly, they fit so perfectly in here, almost too perfectly, that I can't get them out afterwards. So I just need to go with a slightly smaller one than the ones that I have. So I'll do that later. I'm not going to waste your time with that, but this is already pretty heavy. I mean, I could do weights with this planter pot. So I think this one's gonna go in the bathroom. Like I said, I think it could benefit from having far more humidity than it gets here, especially in the winter months. And the bathroom in the meadow house is going to be exceptionally humid. And what I love about the walls, and I'm gonna be interested in seeing how plants react to this, I guess, feature within the meadow house, is that we did clay on the walls. So clay, just like terracotta, I mean, it's, clay, terracotta related. So the clay actually takes on moisture and then releases moisture. So it's very rare that the house ever gets too dry unless you're kind of like beefing up the heat so much. Anyway, I'm not going to remove all of the soil from here. The roots are kind of hanging on, and I don't need to, remove the soil that much. I'll keep what it has there. So I'm just going to make that mix again. Let's get some more of that nice barky orchid mix here. This is and it says orchids, but as you know, orchids are epiphytic. So a lot of epiphytes would like this mix. Bromeliads as well. Okay, let's do some of this. And I could clean up some of the bags that I have around the house, the potting soil bags. I need to get a potting shed, a proper potting bench and potting shed. Okay, so mixing this up. Really, really like the look of this. I should say, and I should caution if you're just going with like kind of raw coconut coir or whatever along those lines, or coconut bark or anything along those lines. And you'll want to make sure that it's been washed out, that it doesn't have any kind of salts in it. That is something that actually when I was in Sweden, I believe it was, when I was in Göteborg, in Gothenburg Botanic Gardens, they had just switched over to, I believe, a potting medium using coconut coir, or was it a fertilizer? One or the other. It turned out having too much salts in the mix, and it was actually killing the plants, or at least diminishing the health of the plants. So I had to be careful for that. All right, I'm gonna move it into this planter pot. I'd actually like to sit up. I'm gonna sit on my haunches, if you will, because I need a little bit more leverage. Okay, so, oh yeah, this is gonna give this plant a lot more space for the roots. I think I was talking about the roots of the Anthurium at some point. I mean, they could get so beefy. I've seen them break out of planter pots. And I mean, that's pretty cool. It's like the Hulk. It's like, so you kind of want to give it its space because it will take it up for sure. All right, so I'm gonna just bring this mix in here, give it a nice base to move into. And I might need to add more afterwards. I'll just show you what I'm doing here. Tip it. So you can see I have a nice little base of soil, just so the roots could grow into that. And I'm gonna stand up a little bit just so I can have a little bit more leverage here. Oh yeah, that's nice. Let me take it out of this gold gilded pot for now. Just work with this standard terracotta. I'm gonna use the rest of this soil, and I'm gonna have to make more because this plant is hungry for soil. Love this epiphytic mix. Adding a couple scoops of regular potting mix and a couple scoops of coconut. And I will add some perlite to this. Cover your nose. So dusty sometimes. And you will want to mix thoroughly. I mean, plants don't really love having to go through different layers of substrate. So ideally it's well mixed. So I'm just gonna go around with this nice mix. You know, this does have charcoal. The epiphytic mix does have charcoal. Charcoal is nice because it's almost like a filtration system. Sometimes you'll see charcoal if you're hiking and you have a water, and you're using the outdoor water, and the charcoal is a filtration system to filter out any kind of nasties like bacteria or anything along those lines, something that makes you sick. So the fact that it does the horticultural charcoal, you find it in horticultural mixes, not a bad thing actually. Might switch over to my spoon here just to get some smaller amounts in the cracks and crevices. Okay. Lovely. All right, look at that, how that turned out. Not bad, right? I think this plant is gonna thank me for this. Okay, so I'm gonna put it into a dish for now before I find the proper dish. And I'm gonna water it again thoroughly. And make sure you go all the way around. That is one thing that I am terrible at sometimes. I'll just water it on one side, and you'll see this like divot just in one section of the planter pot, showing that you're only watering it on one side, and then I'll find that the roots are all kind of like in one section of the planter. So that is one thing that you have to get a bit more disciplined about. Anyway, look at that beauty, look at that beauty. And also the way that it shines. I don't know if the camera is picking up on that. Within the veins, which is probably how it gets its name with the crystallinum. I'm getting ready for the big boy now. All right, let me show you this one. And big doesn't always mean better, I have to say. I am much more of a peperomia gal. The light just started to pour into the windows. So I had to fix that. I had to put some type of filter on the lens here. So you're gonna get some dark shadows and light shadows of this plant. So I don't really know the parentage of this plant. I think it's probably a crystallinum type, meaning there's probably some crystallinum in this plant, but the folks who are growing this plant actually didn't know what it was crossed with. So there's just gonna be a lot of mystery revolving around this plant unless I do some kind of genetic analysis, which is not happening. But it's a pretty sizable plant, and I got it at auction for a fundraiser that was happening. I was up at the Terrain store. I have a little video on the Terrain store for their book launch, and this was one of the plants that was at auction. I didn't really have any kind of like affinity for this plant. There was a really beautiful monstera that I would have loved to take home, but because I was taking the train, I needed something that was a bit more compact. And I really wanted to put this plant in a basket. So, you know, of course, a plant within a planter within a basket. So I have these baskets like this. I have another one of these in my Brooklyn apartment, still haven't brought it back yet. One of my ZZ plants is in it. I love the look of this, but I thought, you know, I would save maybe that basket for one of my bird's nest types of Anthuriums, which also get pretty massive. Yeah, they stay compact, but they kind of like start to reach out and can get really large and take up quite a lot of space. So I decided I'm just gonna go with the straight up old terracotta planter, but this one has a nice kind of green patina. So you can see what that looks like. And I had my ZZ plant in here, so I ended up washing it out with some soap and water. That's kind of what it looks like. It didn't take out all the soil, but I think I pretty much sanitized it to the best of my ability. Yeah, I mean, if I was really lazy, I could just kind of put the plastic planter in like that, but I'm going to repot this because I'm actually really curious what the roots look like. So I'm going to take a look at that. So I'm going to use this planter pot as a way to just pull all this soil out. But boy, oh boy, again, look at those roots here. I'm gonna try to show this on the close-up camera, but you could probably start to see them and show you those roots. Very nice, right? Look how thick those guys are. You could tell that those roots will hold on to water quite well. I'm gonna spread them out in this planter pot some, and it's going to really enjoy this extra space that I give it. I could tell already. And I like that this pot has this like fluted top. So sometimes, you know, you'll see planters that constrict at the top, and I will plant in those. I'll plant in anything. But these fluted planter pots are easy because if and when you need to remove a plant from its pot, it's a lot easier to do that. The way I'm gonna go about this, because it needs quite a bit of substrate, is I might mix as I go. This one again is already mixed, so I'm just gonna pour that in here. What I'm gonna do is layer it in and then mix in the planter pot. And I'm probably gonna use almost all of the substrate, if not every single bit of it. All right. I can almost feel the fact that I'm gonna be having these in a new house, but it takes a while. It takes a while to renovate, actually. So it's so funny. Some of these roots, you're not gonna be able to see this, but you could just have to take my word for it. Some of these roots are kind of like sticking up like this, like little fingers. So I'm gonna have to make sure that those get buried. So you can see this kind of has like a little, likes to go from side to side. So I wanna make sure that I really get it locked in. Some of the Espoma potting mix as well. This already has a fair bit of perlite in it, so I probably won't need to add the perlite. Just compress it down a bit, make sure it's locked in there. And of course, one of the best ways to make sure that it's locked in there is to water it. So that's what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna water this one generously because it can handle being watered. So, let me stand back. There you go. Woo, it's heavy now that I've moved it from plastic to terracotta. So that's that one. My goodness, and I'm sweating. I had my sweater on. It was so hot here, and now it was so cold here, and now it's so hot when the sun is coming out. So look at these guys. Beautiful, beautiful. The sun is out now. You can see how gorgeous that looks. And I also have my crystallinum, but let's put that in the proper planter where it's gonna end up. Oh yeah, look at that. Gilded gold and velvet green. That's such a nice combo. Looks like I have a lot of cleaning up to do here. That was a messy potting, but these guys are gonna be ready. They're gonna be ready for the meadow house when the meadow house is ready for them. Yeah, thank you guys for bearing with me in this repot of these anthuriums, these beautiful anthuriums. And I hope that you'll get to see more anthuriums in the meadow house because they are a plant that I absolutely love, but I've held off on purchasing or acquiring too many, trading, whatever it is, how I get plants and how we get plants these days, because I just want to have the proper spaces for them. But these are looking good, and I'm looking forward to more with you. So I'll see you later. Bye, everyone. Stay tuned on Plant One On Me for more botanical tours, talks, and how-tos. And if you're looking to further your knowledge on the plant kingdom, then have a look at our various online courses from Troubleshoot Your Houseplants to the Houseplant Masterclass. Additionally, we have a second channel we started last year called Flock Finger Lakes, where we cover more on outdoor gardening, habitat restoration, agroforestry, and even more. So check that out if that interests you. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next episode.